Well, if I'm emotional in the story, then people are going to think X about me or Y
Right.
about me. Oh, is this story about you?
Yeah.
Or are you serving people with your story?
Welcome to You Are a Storyteller with Brian McDonald and Jesse Bryan. This program is produced in Seattle, Washington by Belief Agency. On this week's episode, we talk about charged objects and how you can use them to make a deeper emotional connection with your audience.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
How heavy do you think? It was pretty heavy.
I don't know how heavy that is. I don't know.
But as far as like ore goes, what do you think this is worth? Like
I
as
don't
far
know.
as just a piece of metal.
Piece
Like
of
if you
metal?
melted this down,
I don't know. 30 cents.
30 cents?
I don't know.
Okay. So as far as like the value of this from a material standpoint is 30 cents. Maybe.
Maybe.
Probably less.
Mm-hmm.
It's just metal. Now will you tell me what this is?
Yeah. Well, I should say I was speaking at a school talking about story stuff. And there was a guy who was also speaking that day. They had a lot of speakers that day. And this guy has a sort of pop-up museum that he takes around to schools and sets up in the library or something. And so I met this guy, and he had seen me speak or something, and he said, "Hey, you should have this." And I was like, "Okay."
It
And
looks, and just for people that are listening, it kind of looks like a mini horseshoe kind of.
yeah, a little bit of a horseshoe, little piece of metal that
Yeah.
it's not very big. I don't know how big.
Yeah.
How big would you say that was?
It's a little bit bigger than like a silver dollar.
Yeah, something like that. So anyway, this kind of horseshoe piece of metal, he handed it to me and said, "I think you should have this." And I thought this guy had a lot of African artifacts and things like that. He actually had a full-on like clan
Whoa.
costume on display, which is a weird thing to see in real life when
Yeah.
you really see it. So I thought, well, maybe this is some kind of African artifact or something. Or I didn't know what it was. And he goes, "Do you know what it is?" I go, "I don't know." And he said, "This is a piece of slave money." And I'm like, "I don't know what you mean." He goes, "Well, when Europeans went to Africa to trade for slaves, so there'd be unscrupulous chiefs who would raid other villages. One of the things they would trade for human beings were pieces of metal like this. So this is money that was used to buy human beings with in Africa."
So this little like whatever we figured out, let's say best case scenario, 30 cents worth of ore. I could trade this for a human life.
Well, I don't know how many you traded, but yes.
So today we're going to talk about charged objects,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's just a really great way to kind of kick it off because once you understand what this is, you even hold it differently,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What is a charged object, Brian?
Now, as far as I know, I'm the person who gave it that name. I didn't invent them,
Yeah.
but I think I gave it the name. Now, scientists have a different, they have charged objects, but that's a different thing, right? I'm stealing the name from psychics who say that they get an object.
Oh, interesting. That's where the name came from?
Yeah, that's where
Yeah.
I'm getting that, where
You'd be
they get a
like,
hit.
Oh, this was a person's
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, this is the knife that was used in the murder.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I'm getting,
yeah.
right. And so I'm stealing the term from that because it's emotional,
Mm.
right? So a charged object is an object that has story value, because it's emotional.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's not different from charged objects in your life, right? You have charged objects that are, belong to somebody you cared about, or your grandmother's wedding ring, or something.
Maybe
like
it's in
that.
a hope chest or some sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe it's something you wear every day, or
Oh, yeah.
see every day, right? Charged objects often, on the outside, would look worthless,
Yeah.
right? But they're priceless, right? Often they're priceless.
Oh, yeah. I have a necklace that Scout, my little girl, made that's out of like just beads and stuff. And I have it in a box,
Yeah.
just because it's like, well, just don't want to lose it.
Right.
It's like, well, on paper, it has no value. I mean,
Right.
right?
And
But
so,
yeah.
So a charged object in a story is that kind of thing. It's sort of, you can create a sort of sentimental value within a story that an audience will respond to whenever that object is brought up or seen or
Can you give me an
destroyed.
example?
Yeah. In the movie Seabiscuit, the
That
main
movie's great.
the guy who owns Seabiscuit, um, the main character, he has a little boy who died. The little boy tried to drive a car, and crashed it and died. And the little boy had a little game he used to play with, like a little game with a little ball bearing in it where you try to fit it in the holes, move the game around. And
Yeah.
so he kept that. And so whenever he pulls it out in the movie, you know what's on his mind.
Yeah, he's thinking about his little boy.
Right.
And it's a worthless little
it's nothing,
game.
but it's everything,
yeah.
And so that's how they use the charge object. So what it does is it allows you to, without being overly sentimental, without being overly blatant or explanatory, once you've charged that object with emotion, you can bring it out whenever you need to,
Mm-hmm.
and people will fill it in.
Yeah. Oh, that was his grandpa's baseball cap at the
Yeah.
beginning of the movie, right? Oh, now
Yeah.
he's wearing it around. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, got it, right?
Yeah.
It's funny, brands work the same way, when you talk about like the logo is what catches the emotion,
Mhm.
That's why they'll put the logo at the end of a commercial where it's like you see an awesome like Nike spot or something, and then they'll show the logo because the logo kind of catches all that emotion, right? And then later on when you see the logo, you feel differently, and that's the delta. And so we'll use examples from a brand perspective where we'll say like, okay, well, how much would you pay for this whatever pinball machine? And then somebody says, I don't know, I'll give you $200 for it. It's like, well, who's your favorite musician? And Bob Dylan. What if I told you it was Bob Dylan's pinball machine? Would you pay more? Yeah, I'd pay $10,000. I go, the difference between $300 and $10,000, that's the brand. That's the story. It is now charged because now you can walk in the room and be like, whose pinball machine it was? That was Bob Dylan's pinball machine, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I have a piece of a building that it fell off the building, and I'm like, I'm taking this, and it doesn't look like anything. It's the what do you call it? That's between the bricks. The
mortar.
The mortar.
Yeah.
So it's a piece of mortar. And but it's from Bruce Lee's studio.
Huh.
His one of his first studios. And so I knew that was a studio. And so it's an old building, and it's sort of falling apart. They've sort of fixed it up since then. But
Yeah.
I'm like, there are pieces of it on the ground. So I'm like, I'm taking this.
Is it the one downtown or is there a different
It's
one?
in the ID in the International District. Yeah.
Oh,
Chinatown.
cool. Yeah, I know where that one is. I didn't know if there was one before that.
I think there's one somewhere else in town, but
Huh.
yeah,
That's cool.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, he was the man.
So, I have this piece of, it's nothing. Nobody would know,
Right. But for you, when it's sitting on whatever your desk or wherever you have it,
Yeah.
you go, yeah, it reminds me of Bruce Lee and
Mm-hmm.
what he was like and what a cool guy he was.
Yeah, and I have a piece of tile from a movie theater I used to go to when I was a kid. They had these tiles outside as you went in at the
Yeah.
entrance, and where I saw Star Wars when it came out, and so I have a piece of tile from there.
You made a documentary about that theater, right?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Where
Yeah.
can people see that? I like that doc.
They can see it on YouTube.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, flickering memories.
Nice.
Yeah, or you can also see it on Vimeo.
Why is it important for storytellers to understand the concept of charged objects?
Because if you're now, not every filmmaker's trying to evoke emotion. I think they should be, but
Right.
that's up to them. If you are trying to evoke emotion, then it's another tool in your toolbox to do that, to make that happen.
Yeah.
And it's a way of getting the audience to do the work for you in a way that allows you to pull off of it and not be so, you don't have to hit people over the head with what you're trying to say, or,
Right.
you know what I mean? Once you bring out that object, people bring their own
Yep.
emotions to it.
It's kind of like it's in Awakenings where Leonard carves his name at the beginning, and then later on you see him trying to do it again as an adult,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And that becomes like this thing where he's going back.
Right.
It's like that's really smart.
Yeah. Well, there's in Bobby Fischer, in Searching for Bobby Fischer,
Mm-hmm.
there's it's so great the way they do it, because Ben Kingsley's character is teaching this kid how to play chess. I mean, the kid knows how to play chess. He's a chess genius, but he's like his coach. And at one point, Ben Kingsley pulls out this certificate that says that this guy achieved a certain master class chess player or something, and he pulls it out, and he's very careful with it. It's very delicate, and there's like a couple of like, let me get all the creases out, and he's very delicate with it, and he says, when you get enough masterclass points, this is what you can get. You can get this certificate, and it says whatever it says about him. And the kid wants one, and now that's all he wants. Later, he's being coached, and he's like, well, how many points do I get? And Ben Kingsley's like, you don't get any points for that. He goes, but I want my certificate. And he goes, you want a certificate? And he pulls out his briefcase, and he's got a briefcase full of these certificates. He goes, you know what? It's just a piece of paper. It doesn't mean anything. And he starts slapping them on the table. But first time he was really careful with them.
Yeah.
Slapping them on the table and throwing them out on the floor. They mean nothing. They mean nothing. They mean nothing. But he gets kicked out of the house. The mom kicks him out. Like, don't do that to my son.
Yeah.
But then later, when the kid achieves a certain, because Ben Kingsley's character is trying to teach the kid that that chess is more about just winning and losing. Right. So at the end of the piece, and the whole piece is about how this kid has a good heart.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the movie, if you haven't seen the movie, I'm giving it away, but it's still amazing. So I'm not ruining anything. But at the end of the movie, the kid is about to win a chess match, right? And because at one point Ben Kingsley says he doesn't want the kid going into these tournaments because he goes, you know what, these tournaments are about winning and losing. And the kid's dad's like, yeah, what else would it be about? And Ben Kingsley's character, what am I trying to say? So at the end, the kid is fighting his rival. They're having a chess match, and the kid says, he holds out his hand to his opponent, and he says, the guy's like, what are you doing? He goes, I'm offering you a draw. Let's just share the championship. Yeah. And the kid's like, no, because the other kid he's about winning and losing. The other kid is a clone character who's about winning and losing, right? So that kid ends up losing, right? The Bobby Fischer kid, the Josh ends up winning. And at the end of that, because he's reached this point in his life, his understanding that it's not about winning and losing, right? It's about something else. Now, Ben Kingsley takes out the certificate, hands him the certificate, and says that you've earned the certificate, right? So it goes from being a valuable object to a worthless object to a priceless object.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it's the same piece of paper.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same piece of paper. So it's just a great tool. And anytime you can call things back like that, it's so a scene can almost be a charged object, or a line can almost be a charged object.
Explain, what do you mean by line? Can you give me an example of a line?
I can tell you a scene, and maybe a line will come to me. So in Kramer versus Kramer, the character, Dustin Hoffman's character, his wife leaves him, and he has to take care of his kid, 5-year-old boy who he doesn't know how to take care of because he's always working and he doesn't know how to take care of this kid. And so you see him on the first day, trying to make French toast for his son, and it's awful. It's terrible. He can't do it. He's bad at it. The next time you see him later in the movie, it's almost exactly the same scene in a lot of ways, but they've changed how they do things. So now it's like donuts and cereal for breakfast and whatever, but it's calm, right? As the two characters get used to each other.
Yeah.
At the very end of the movie, when Dustin Hoffman has lost custody of his kid and he's making breakfast for him, he makes French toast perfectly, just quietly makes French toast perfectly. And that becomes charged, right? Because we have a memory.
No, it's really smart.
We have a memory of how they started, how rough it was.
Yeah.
And in the middle, it's a 3-act structure, but it's just for this.
Yeah.
Just this, but sometimes, the right line, the right word.
What about get busy living, get busy dying? Because
get busy living, get busy dying.
Because what does he say? He said they're up against the wall and they're talking.
Mm-hmm.
That's when he makes the decision.
Yeah. And
then later on, Red, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much mimics that.
Yeah, that has resonance. That's the same kind of thing that has resonance like that. I know I
Remember
have.
that, like Roger Deakins, he like split the scene with the light.
Oh yeah,
it's so crazy.
yeah, that's an amazing
Yeah.
scene. Yeah, but it could be anything. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
It just it literally can be
What about
almost
the combat thing you were telling me about?
Oh,
Would that line be?
yeah, it's hard to explain though.
Mm.
It's hard to explain, but sometimes you can tell if a character is yeah, that's so hard to explain.
Yeah.
I have to explain the whole episode.
What about Truman Show at the end when he says, "If I don't see you," right? Because remember at the beginning he's like,
I don't remember the Truman Show.
he says something like he uses a line at the beginning and then he pulls it back again as the very last line, but now it is a completely different.
Yes, that's
Right.
often what happens.
Mhm.
Things have a completely different meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
because
seems almost like not that big of a deal the first time they say it. And you're like, oh, that's kind of a funny line. But it's different enough that you remember.
Mhm.
Then when they bring it back, you oh, okay.
Yeah, but it works. You see it with stand-up comedy. You see it with these playbacks.
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
These
See it in comedy
callbacks.
a lot. Yeah.
Right, like people bring something back
Yep.
that they started with or whatever.
And didn't seem like a big deal, but when they bring it back, you're like, oof.
Yeah.
It really gets you.
Yeah. And it's the same thing. It's the same technique. So people respond to things because they're familiar,
Mm.
right? So dancers use the same technique. A dancer will often do a movement and then repeat the movement later, and the audience responds because they're familiar with it.
Right.
So it's just something human beings do,
Yeah.
and so it's a way to tap into that.
How did you become familiar with it? Because if you took the kind of like the not say what's the person the charge object really came from
Yeah, psychics.
but when did you start going like, oh, that's a thing?
I don't know. It was something I had noticed, the pattern I noticed. I don't think I gave it even a name or a term or put anything on it, except I was talking once to Stuart Stern about it. Stuart we've talked about before.
Yeah.
Pretty big deal screenwriter, and we were talking about it. And he talked about imbuing an object with emotion, but he didn't have a name for it. He just said, you should do that, and a lot of people don't do that. It was interesting because he told me once that his best friend was Paul Newman. So Paul Newman came to town to visit him.
Yeah.
And Stuart was teaching a class at the University of Washington at the time. And so Paul came up and
he came to class.
Yeah, but he wasn't going to come to class. But Stuart's like, I got to go teach a class. And Paul's like, well, I'll come with you. And then they went to class.
God.
And then Paul was like, is there any place I can hide? So like, is there a back room or something I can go into? And because he didn't want to be recognized. He didn't like being recognized. And Stuart was like, no, there's no place to go. So Paul Newman just sat up front with Stuart. And as people walked into the classroom, they were shocked that Paul Newman was there. And then Paul later taught part of the class and talked about object work and talked about what you can do with objects in terms of imbuing them with emotion.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I had seen that class.
Oh my
I only
God.
heard
Can you
about it
imagine?
from Paul. Yeah. I mean, from Stuart. But yeah, so it's probably amazing. I wish I
Yeah.
had seen it.
I was thinking about The Verdict when you were talking about Paul Newman,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
there's
some amazing
stuff with objects in that movie that's pretty.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's really powerful what you can do with them,
Yeah.
with an object.
I
Anyway,
love that both of them had that language though.
imbue it with,
Well, they both had that, like the fact that Stuart was teaching on it and Paul was like, I can talk about it too.
right.
They both understood it as the concept.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just like, almost like, it wasn't like, they're like, well, yeah, you guys don't know this,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
The fact that he could come up and even teach on it, it means that like at some point this must have been something that people just understood.
I think it was. I think that something happened. I don't know what. Maybe it was this idea that you have to be an individual, right? So what happens is if somebody wants to be an individual, they don't like using tried and true methods, right? Like, oh, sure, use a charge object, but anybody can. Like they think it's going to make your stuff the same as everybody else's,
Yeah.
but of course it doesn't. And I think that in the old days there was no fear of that. That people knew they brought themselves to the project, and any technique that helped them get their idea across was going to be useful to them.
Yeah.
And now it's all about, I'm going to do something nobody has ever done before. I'm not going to do that. That's formulaic or whatever. But that's not the way the audience responds. When you do it well, they just respond.
Yeah.
They go, oh, that's that game that his kid played with or
Yeah.
whatever.
Man, that's a good movie too.
It's a really
Speaking
good
of Stuart, what's on the floor right here? You want to talk about that?
Sure. This is a charged object too. This is
I guess for people that are just listening, what are you holding?
I am holding a long overcoat. Now, Stuart, I often wear long coats in the wintertime. And Stuart liked my coats and that I wore them. And this was Stuart's favorite coat. It's a very nice coat.
Yeah.
Heavy coat. Anyway, so it was Stuart's favorite coat. And when he died, his widow gave me that coat because she thought he would want me to have it. But Stuart couldn't wait for it to get cold so he could wear the coat.
He loved it.
He loved it. What I like about when I first got it, it used to smell like Stuart, which was nice. But I still feel when I wear it like I'm always getting a hug from Stuart.
Yeah.
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 And so it's charged, you know.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And everywhere I go, I get compliments on that coat. They don't know the history of it, but it's like he picked a good coat. And so I'm just the lucky recipient of it now, but it is charged.
But one of the coolest things about this is once people really start connecting the dots on like, this isn't made up stuff,
Right.
right? This isn't, you observe something, but it happens in nature. So you
Right.
have them in your life. Why wouldn't you also leverage that in your storytelling?
Right.
So I guarantee you there's things where like, oh, that was my grandma's wedding ring.
Mhm.
Or, whatever it is. Oh, those are my grandpa's shoes or whatever. You mentioned something earlier. You said about your dad's shoes.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
So when my dad died, well, it's funny. You know what? I had a BLT today
Uh-huh.
because I was just writing about this for the new book I'm working on. And I was just writing about BLTs. The first time I had a BLT was with my dad. We were up late. It was the first time I was up late with my dad, all just me and my dad. And the house was quiet. Everybody was asleep. I don't know what time it was. It seemed late to me.
Uh-huh.
Maybe it was 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
seemed really late to me. And he made a BLT. And actually, on the anniversary of his death, I usually have a BLT. And but today I just wanted one because I was thinking about him.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of a charged object.
Yeah.
Yeah. We watched The Honeymooners, the old sitcom.
Oh, awesome.
And ate BLTs. And so so I'll watch The Honeymooners often. And,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah. So The Honeymooners becomes kind of charged that
Yep.
way.
Yeah.
The sandwich becomes sort of charged that way. But anyway, my dad, so when he died and I was cleaning out his apartment, his sister, my aunt, there were shoes and things, and I hadn't seen my dad for a long time. That's another story, but I hadn't seen him for a while. And he had all these shoes because my dad was a pretty serious athlete, and he had all these nice Nikes and stuff. Excuse me. And my aunt was like, "Oh, you can't fit those, because your dad was taller and all of that, and you couldn't fit these shoes." And I'm like, okay. So I didn't try them on or anything. I just figured, well, I'll give them to my brother, or I'll give them to somebody, And then I think it was the night before I gave the eulogy at his funeral, and I'm like, I wonder if I can fit these shoes. And I was like, they fit perfectly.
Huh.
So it was like, I'm literally in my dad's shoes right now. Like I'm literally the adult here now. Like,
That's cool.
yeah, it was kind of amazing. It was an amazing feeling
Yeah.
to put those. They fit like a glove, like they fit perfectly.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
But but that would also work in a movie perfectly well, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this person, is going to give his dad. Next thing you know, you see him put him on, and then you see he's giving the speech at the funeral, and then you see his feet. He's
Yeah.
wearing those shoes.
Yeah.
Like it's just a great thing to be aware of, right?
yeah,
And like I said, what I really like about it is it's based on nature. It's based on how we work,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like you ever gone to someone's house and they have trinkets and things. It's like we all do it.
Right.
It's like,
Well,
that car is really cool. And you're like, well, it was not just a car. That was my
Right.
grandma's car. Or whatever,
Yeah.
Right.
This Spider-Man that I have here.
Yeah.
So I have a Spider-Man toy or statue, whatever you would call it. But anyway, I have this in my
Art.
office.
It's
It's art.
yes.
But I have it. I like it, actually. It's cool sculpture. But my friend Scott who's dead now, but really liked Spider-Man. He's the guy who introduced me to comics. I really didn't read comics before him, and so we were inseparable as teenagers, and he was just a huge Spider-Man fan, like a huge Spider-Man fan. Everywhere, like he would just go around, and he only lived to see one of the movies, like the first Tobey Maguire movie. But before that, he used to just run around, holding his hand like Spider-Man and saying "Flit, flit," because that's what it said in the comic. Flit, flit, flit. Like he was just crazy for Spider-Man. And I knew I associated him with Spider-Man, but actually, when he died, his dad put the lyrics to the Spider-Man cartoon from the '60s on the funeral program. Like that's how much people thought of him. And as a matter of fact, a weird thing that happened was, when he was in the hospital dying, I walked out of my apartment to get in the car to go to the hospital to see him, and somebody had projected an image of Spider-Man on the side of a building across the street from my apartment building.
Oh, crazy.
Randomly.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when people come to my office, I have this. People think it's Spider-Man, but it's not Spider-Man to me. It's Scott.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not Spider-Man.
And then even
I got nothing against Spider-Man. But it's Scott.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And so the big thing is like, well, how could you, if you examine your life for charged objects, then all of a sudden you're going to find all sorts of really cool stuff where you're like, oh, I never really thought about that as a charged object.
Right.
And you're like, well, why wouldn't you leverage that in your storytelling?
Yeah. It's it's an amazing tool. Any of those things, that's the thing that people don't understand about this stuff, that none of it is made up, right?
Yeah.
That it's not just some idea that somebody had.
No, exactly. And that's what I want people to see.
Yeah.
It's not like you made something up.
Right.
It's all this stuff works because it's based on real life.
Right.
The armature is based on real life. Like all these different things.
Everything is. Well, I was telling you about clones, right?
Mm.
Clone characters.
Yeah.
Earlier today. And I was saying that one of the ways I sometimes explain it is that, a clone character is a way to measure, right? So, well, Bobby Fischer had a clone character, right? You had the kid who just cared about winning and losing, and the kid that learned there was something more than that, right? But in real life, once I was on a train and we were on the side of a mountain on a cliff, it was like a sheer drop, and this train is going around, and I was like, can this even be real? Like it was it was so surreal. I'm sure there was more ledge than it looked like, but it looked like we were just on the edge of this cliff going around this mountain. And as I'm looking down, and it seemed to go down a long ways, and I'm a little nervous about it. And as I look down, at one point we round a corner, and I see at the bottom of this cliff a rusted out old train car that had obviously fallen at some point. That immediately becomes a clone. That immediately becomes something that you go, oh, wait, that could be us. We could be there. And that it works in stories because that's the way it works in life.
Indiana Jones, right? He's going into the very first temple, and there's the spikes with the guy's skull on it. Whatever.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, this happened before. It could happen. It's like, yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Forstall.
Yep.
That was the guy. Nice. Forstall. He was good.
Yeah.
He was very good.
Smart.
Yeah. Right. Now you know. Now the audience knows.
Yep.
Oh, okay, you could die here.
But that clone character was a real life thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm assuming if you were to write it, something where there's a train, that would probably pop in your head.
I'm sure it would.
And once the whole thing is like, once you understand the concepts, then things will pop in your head that maybe you weren't aware of. I mean, you were talking about the fish thing the other day when you were teaching.
What did I say?
You were talking about the fish allergy, right?
Oh, right.
Blue lips.
Yeah.
And how it just shows up, right? You want to kind of, like, I thought that was an example of, like, if you understand the concepts, your brain will kick in a story later on when you're writing and go, oh, there's a charged object.
Right.
How do I use this?
Right. So this is an example of how we use stories to navigate the world, right?
Yeah.
So I was talking to a woman I know. We were in an improv class together, and I was talking to her, and she had been a flight attendant, and we were talking about things that had happened to her on planes, weird things that had happened, strange things, and she said that one time she was on a plane, and there was a little kid who kept getting up and going to the bathroom, and he was annoying all the flight attendants, but she got worried about him, nervous. So she went and talked to the mother and said, is your son okay? And the woman said, yeah, I think so. And she goes, well, it's just that he keeps getting up and going to the bathroom. I'm just wondering if something's wrong. And then she said she noticed that the kid's lips looked swollen to her. And she said, I remembered a story my parents had told me about my father having a reaction to fish, had a fish allergy. And so I asked, is your kid allergic to anything? And she said, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. She said, well, let me check something. So she checked the menu and she saw that they served a salad that had shrimp in it. So she goes, I think he's having an allergy, a fish reaction to fish. So she got on the phone to the Mayo Clinic from the plane and they told her what to do. And there was a doctor on board and that helped. And but she ended up helping this kid, maybe saving this kid's life because she knew what was going on.
Yeah.
When she heard that story about her father the first time, I'm sure she was just concerned about her father.
Yeah.
But what she got out of it was this survival information that we talk about, what stories do, right? So she was able to recognize the symptoms.
Yeah.
Right? She was able to, it's like, oh, wait, these are the symptoms. What causes those symptoms? This is what I know from a story.
Yeah.
Right? So the story is always there when you need it. And we catalog things, that we put things in our.
But there was no way when she went to work that day that she thought about that story.
No.
It was way back there. She probably never thought she'd use it again.
Yeah.
And then the second she needed it, you said it was right there in front of her mind.
That happens all the time with us. We just don't know it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of these things happen beneath the surface. So sometimes when you tell people these things, they're like, why do I have to do that? Why do I have to follow your rules? Why do I have to do it this? It's like if you just calm down, right?
Yeah.
And observe it in life, you'll see how useful it is, because it's just, like Aristotle said, it's just an imitation of life.
Yeah. And that makes sense. And you're sort of teaching again. Here, we started up our teaching schedule again. And like, it's one of the things when I was setting up before you taught, I was like, the whole goal of this is like, think about this less of story class, more like chemistry class. We all just want to get the same understanding of like, this is how chemistry works, right? Then once you know that, you could go do whatever you want with the chemistry, right? The goal is not to make, a bunch of carbon copies of Brian McDonald. The goal is for you to be the best version of yourself.
Yep.
Right. And if we can all agree, it's like, well, when you do this and this, these compounds act this way. It's like, cool. Now go make something that's unique to you and your perspective, but you're not messing around trying to reinvent chemistry.
Right.
You're actually spending all your time thinking about, cool, what am I trying to say? How do I say that? What's the best way to do that? This baseline understanding actually is more about helping you just be and say the things you're trying to say. Yep. Instead of goofing around with all the like, well, you say chemistry works that way, I'm going to go invent my own way of doing it. It's like, we already kind of figured out how some of this stuff works.
Right.
Let's just all adhere to that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You have your version of how, the planets are organized in the solar system. And you go like, well, why would you want to go create your own? Now we can all just understand there's a baseline understanding. The sun's at the middle. Yeah. Right. And then you're like, cool. Now let's spend our time figuring out what are we trying to say about the universe as opposed to arguing about whether or not the sun's at the middle of it or not.
Right.
Does that make sense? It's like all you're trying to do is help somebody go like, oh, cool, charged object. Great. Now what are you trying to make?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Now how do you leverage that in a way that actually tells a story in a way that moves people and accomplishes what you're trying to do?
Yeah. I guess what happens is people often, even though we talk about it in intellectual terms, you can over intellectualize this stuff, right? So you can say, again, well, that's the way it works for you, but I have to think of some other thing that works in order to be unique, right? But you don't. It works. Use it. You don't. Do you want to build a house, or do you want to invent a new hammer?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have a hammer and you have nails. You can build whatever you want. It's just like chemistry. You can build whatever you want. But when one of the biggest problems I think people have is this thing I think I started off saying, which is they think it's somebody's concept instead of an observation. And that blocks them.
Yeah.
Why do I have to do it that way?
Well, that's just how Brian wants to do it.
Right.
And you're going, no, hold on. I observed that people have these things, these objects in their lives. And I was talking to Stuart about it, and Stuart was like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So did Paul Newman. And you're like, okay, cool. And then you just found a way, like, for me, it seems like it's one of those charged objects that, like,
Yeah.
Psychics talk about. It's like, great, but that's a naturally observed thing. And it's actually really easy to compare and contrast and go like, do you have any? Well, yeah, I guess I have a whole bunch of those myself. Great. Well, then your characters probably do.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. And even if your characters don't recognize the objects as charged, the audience can.
Oh, sure. Like that dad in Seabiscuit, I bet he didn't realize he was doing. It's just like, I just care. This game it was my kid's game, and he probably doesn't think right, like
Yeah.
the significance of it,
Right.
But the audience sure sees it.
Right. Or you could, a space can be charged, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say something happened in a particular space early in the story.
Yeah.
You put people back in that space under
Yep.
different circumstances.
Yeah.
That space is charged.
Yep.
If for instance you see a couple in a space and one of them is sick or one of them dies, and then you see that
Yeah.
person in that space all by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. This
Yeah.
is where their first date was, and now they're there and it's empty, and you're sitting there. The audience knows exactly what you're trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. The problem, here's what I find, is that people often see story structure done poorly. That's when they notice it.
Mm-hmm.
So then the conclusion that they erroneously draw is that story structure doesn't work because when I've seen it, it's noticeable to me. But what they don't know is, there's 100 other times
Yeah.
that you didn't notice.
Yeah.
It just worked. Anything can be done poorly.
Yeah.
Pointing to a poorly executed thing is not the same thing as saying that thing doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
like having a car that doesn't run and saying, well, cars.
Yeah. Cars in general don't work. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the whole thing. It should, in a perfect world, it's actually invisible. People can just enjoy the story and
Mm-hmm.
right. And oftentimes it is. I mean, as somebody who studies this a lot, it's like I'll go to movies and I'll it'll be obvious to me. I'm like, oh well, there's the end of the
Right.
first act just ended, or oh, that was the armature, and you look around, it's like everybody's just eating their popcorn and just
They
enjoying the
don't-
movie. It's like good.
Yeah. They don't know,
Yeah.
Oh, I just watched the King's Speech again,
Mm-hmm.
and they do a really interesting thing because it's a charged object that isn't a sentimental object, but it's a threat. Every time that microphone shows up,
Mm.
every time that character who has to give a speech,
Yeah.
who's afraid of public speaking because of his stammer,
Yeah.
the microphone becomes charged.
Mm.
Every time you see it, you're like, oh, that represents all
Oh,
this.
totally.
Yeah, this nervousness this character
Mhm.
has.
They did a great job with that too.
They did an amazing job
Yeah.
of that. Yeah. So that's a charged object,
Yeah.
the mic.
It's really smart.
Yeah. But it could be anything. It could be a hat or
Sure.
glasses or
Yep.
false teeth. It doesn't matter what
Oh,
it
yeah.
is.
If you were walking through a museum and you saw a big top hat, you'd immediately go like, "Oh, that's Abraham Lincoln," or whatever. It's like these things, right?
Yeah.
These visuals that you can pull, you can just leverage this stuff and do something really interesting. The emotion thing you said a second ago, I think, is worth going back to, where you said like, "But I think it should be emotional, but do whatever you want."
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do you think people are so worried about having stories be emotional?
I think,
Because you and I run into that quite a bit.
yeah, we do run into that. I think that I don't know why in this society we think emotions are cheap.
Hmm.
We'd much rather be in our heads. And so
You
we think
that's the Descartes type.
we think
I think
Yeah,
therefore I am type stuff.
I
and
think so.
now the mind got elevated above
Above
everything else.
Yeah, above emotions. And
Yep.
so I think that can be dangerous.
Yeah.
I think stories, particularly drama, by drama I mean just performed stories, could be comedy too. But dramas really I think are an emotional thing. Like the Greeks designed it to be
Yeah.
emotional. They knew it was supposed to be emotional. So I that's just the way I think they work best. I think that but there are plenty of people who think, oh, this movie made me think, or this thing made me think, and they think I don't think that's the way to go. I don't think that's what the form was designed to do.
Yeah.
I think it was designed to make us feel, because that's also worthwhile. But
Mhm.
our society pushes back on that. So Capra had that issue. because his stuff was
Spielberg
most
has that issue.
has
Yeah.
that issue, right? People feel manipulated, um, and so they'd much rather feel nothing
Hmm.
than something. And if you fail at making people feel, right, you attempt but you fail, you're going to be judged much more harshly than you would be if you fail to make somebody think, right? If you attempt to make them think, what happens is if you fail there,
Mm-hmm.
people will think anyway.
Yeah.
And then if they're confused, they will. It's a very interesting thing about confusing people in this culture. If you confuse people with your stories, people think you're smarter than they are.
Hmm.
They must be really smart because I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
Right? Which is something I don't understand. Right? If I think the primary job of a storyteller is to communicate. If you can't communicate, that's on you. That's not on me for not getting it.
Right.
But we in this society tend to blame ourselves for not getting it.
Yeah.
Right? We don't put the onus on the storyteller.
Yeah.
Right? We put the onus on the listener. It's like, why is the responsibility on the listener?
No, it's backwards.
It is backwards. And of course, that just automatically puts you in your head because you're trying to figure out what are they doing? What are they? Right.
Yeah.
But there are people who love to live in that space. They get a dopamine hit or something from living in that space. And so they go, this was good because I'm getting this dopamine
Yeah.
hit. But getting a dopamine hit isn't always good. Right.
No.
You know?
No.
But there are a lot of people who like to live in that space and they think it's a much safer space in this society to live in.
Yeah.
You're risking something if you go out with emotional content, right?
But that's what we actually want. Like that's what.
Yeah, it is. It is what we want. I mean, people, when you do something that is emotional, that really works, like Shawshank Redemption or something, there's no substitute. There's no, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nothing's better than when that happens.
Right.
And you don't have to argue. It's funny when something's intellectual and not emotional.
Yeah.
People have great discussions about what it means and this and that and whatever. And I think it means this. I think it means that. Blah, blah, blah. But when something's emotional and it really works, there's no trying to convince people. People don't say, boy, you should see Shawshank. I'd be interested to know what you thought about Shawshank. I think it's pretty good. They go, oh my God, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Really
simple.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
They don't make excuses for it. They don't.
Yeah. E.T. whatever.
Nemo. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Oh man, those first few minutes of Up. Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You hear people talk about like it's crazy. It's like they don't. It's like they love to feel stuff, but the risk in creating it, people are scared of creating it.
Yeah.
They're scared of it because if they fail, this is just not a society where we it's just easy to pick on people who've tried to do something emotional.
Right.
And we're afraid of it. And anybody who does that kind of work is really being brave in this society.
Yeah, it's really hard.
It is hard.
But going back to look at the first setting, right? The nature, it's like people are emotional. I think the future, we talk about brands, from here, it's like the future of brands or whoever's the most human is going to win. Like it's all about being human.
Right.
And how do you get more and more vulnerable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because why try to compete with a computer?
Right.
We're never going to be computers. We're organic.
Right.
It's like, if you really think our stories should be like computers, you're crazy.
Right.
Doesn't make any sense. Right?
Well, yeah.
We're human beings, and human beings are emotional creatures.
Not only that, emotions, that's why we do things, right? So it's why it's like if you're going to convince anybody.
You'd be like, I want to be in love intellectually. You'd be like, really?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want any of that other weird feelings.
Yeah.
I don't want the whole feeling side of love. I want the intellectual experience of love. You'd be like, huh. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well,
like your therapist would go like, run that by me one more time. Cause that doesn't, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking about like the problems we have like with climate change and all of that, right? When we don't talk about it in emotional terms, we are, I think, doing a disservice to the problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Easy to ignore.
It's easy to ignore, right? But when people think about their kids, living in this world that we're making,
Yeah.
right? Because that's a real thing.
Yeah.
Um, and it's honest to talk about the emotions there.
Yeah.
You know, there's a an episode of The Twilight Zone that Rod Serling wrote called The Shelter.
Uh-huh.
Have you seen?
Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, where he builds a bomb shelter. The character builds a bomb shelter, and he only has enough room for so many people, and people keep trying to come into his bomb shelter because they think that there are nukes coming. And the guy's like, I only have room for, my family. And he lets some people in. And one guy said, you got to let my kids in, So it's this
Yeah.
whole thing about that. And there's an interview with Rod Serling talking about that episode. And they were asking, well, would you build a bomb shelter? Do you have one? And he goes, well, I thought about it. He goes, my wife and I talked about it, but, I have 2 kids. And he said, survive for what? Like,
Yeah.
what world would I be?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want them to live in a world after a nuclear
Right.
war. Like, so he just thought, he got to the point where he thought it was sort of cruel at that point. That it would be easier if they just
all went together.
went together versus like, radiation poisoning and people fighting over a can of soup and stuff.
Right.
No,
Sounds awful.
Yeah, it sounds awful. And he's like, nah, I don't want that. And so, but he put it in emotional terms.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think that we don't understand.
But that's why all that his stuff worked.
All of Rod Serling stuff worked because it was that. It was
emotional.
Yeah. And we don't understand how powerful that is. And we're afraid of it. But if you're not afraid of it, it's amazing what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how you can move people and change people. We can change their mind a lot more easily.
Yep.
With emotions.
Yep.
They actually feel something. It's a completely different thing.
Yep.
And if people understood that, they wouldn't be as afraid of it.
Yeah.
They're also, fear is making it about you, by the way, I think.
Help me understand that. What do you mean by that?
Well, if I'm emotional in the story, then people are going to think X about me or Y about me. Oh, is this story about you?
Yeah.
Or are you serving people with your story?
Oh, you and I, we made that one thing, and there was those 2 people in it. They got emotional, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that got cut. And we were going, why would you cut this stuff? And they were cut it because they thought it was too emotional.
Right.
But it was a documentary, and all those things that actually happened. And the person was being emotional about the subject we were shooting.
Right.
And we kind of looked at each other, going like, "What?
Why would you cut it?
Why would you cut that? It's so important to the film." And it was because them being emotional is what scared them.
Right.
And so you're just like, well, we just cut the whole part of the film out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People often cut the heart out.
More like a informational class now.
Yeah. I mentioned that before. People will often cut the heart out.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that several times. People, if something's working, it will often be attacked by other people.
Yeah.
Like that whole thing, cut that out.
Yeah.
I've had that happen several times.
And then the crappy thing is they cut it out and then they put it out there, and it's probably usually more successful than other things.
Yeah.
And they go, well, it's a good thing we cut that out.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, there's no way to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
no, it's
like,
true.
let's run your version and our version.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like you're screwed no matter what.
Yeah. But what I found is that the stuff that I got pushback on, often when it does come out, if it comes out the way I want, is the stuff that people respond to the most. Oh, that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love those characters. And they're like, well,
yeah.
No one else is ever going to get to see him again.
Yeah. Or whatever. I mean, like, even the stuff that's like, there were plenty of things. Old Souls.
Yeah.
There were some things people wanted me to change about that when it was a screenplay, before it was a graphic novel, that I didn't change. And people,
like what?
Can
you talk about any of them, or would it put somebody on blast, like your editor or
something?
No.
Well, in the beginning of that story, this is not about charged objects or anything. This is about just the
struggle of,
Yeah. But at the beginning of the story, there are some guys reminiscing about their deaths.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that was put there at the beginning because of outer boundaries, right? So I think that a good story lets people know exactly where it's going to go in terms of what you're expecting the audience to swallow, right?
Right.
I'm going to expect you to believe this, so
Yeah.
you introduce it as quickly as possible.
Harry Potter can fly on a broom or whatever.
Whatever,
Yeah.
yeah. So you have till the end of the first act essentially to introduce that stuff.
Yeah.
But I like to start with it if I can. So I started there, partially because you have to see a guy's regular life after that.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to see a guy live his life.
Yeah. But
Right.
you know it's going to come back to that death thing.
Right. And I had somebody say to me, you should cut that whole opening. And I'm like, well, I can't cut it. And they were like, I don't think you need it. And I was like, but you can't unknow it.
Yeah.
Right? A new audience won't have that information that you now have.
No, if you cut that would change the whole thing.
Right. And this guy was insistent that I cut it.
Huh.
And
he probably worked. I'm assuming he worked, like he was a writer or something.
Yeah, he was
because I know that sometimes you have these like really incredible people read your stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that usually I'm like, really, Brian? That's interesting. You'd be like, yeah, no, this person's very good. But, or they have a big reputation or something.
Mm-hmm.
They thought I should cut this thing or that thing. And I'll be like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough for me because I think people think I'm inflexible. So that can be tough.
But you know that opener had to be there.
Yeah.
And if you read the book, anybody who's read the book will go, yeah, of course. How else would you open it?
Yeah. But they just thought, oh, just start with a guy's life. I'm like, but why would you read that?
Yeah.
There's nothing, right? It's you start with Indiana Jones being chased by boulders and then you show him in the classroom.
Yeah.
That's the way it works.
Yeah.
You show James Bond doing some crazy thing and then you show him getting his assignment. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
So you don't start a James Bond movie with him in an office getting an assignment.
Yeah. Nope, totally.
Yeah.
It works for very specific reasons. It's not a fluke.
Right.
And like we've talked about before, if you study the old directors, they'll tell you stuff like that.
They say it all the time.
You got to do this if you want people to feel like that. And then you got to do this. And then when you're done with that, you got to move over here because it's important that they know this or what. Like they understood there's things you can do to help drive people towards the correct outcome.
Yeah. It's really strange because, you can read, if you read any, I say this all the time to people and they don't do it. You read any old classic director, you read an interview with them, there will be information, principles that you can use, that you can apply to your own work.
And they'll just give it away.
Yeah. Here you go. This always works. Do this.
I watched an interview with Hitchcock today. Just fires gold constantly.
Yeah. Nobody listens to it, but he tells you exactly how to do what he did.
Yeah.
But all those people could do it. Chaplin can do it. All those people can do it, right? But pick up an interview now with anyone at random and see if you learn anything you can apply. You will not. You'll learn about them and their approach and their thoughts and their ideas and how nobody had ever seen this on the screen before. Or you learn a lot about them.
Yeah.
But you don't learn a lot about the craft.
You
know,
I told you I read an interview today where the person who's been interviewed was like, I don't see stories having any like responsibility toward pretty much the content they're creating. Like whether it's a moral story or anything, I just don't see why storytellers would have any responsibility to the stories they're putting out. And we're reading that being like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's not an unusual position. But it doesn't, if you know anything about history and the history of storytelling, you would know it just didn't develop that. Stories didn't develop that way. Stories developed Zen parables and all these things. They developed specifically to have a reason to be told.
Sure.
Right. And not just to entertain.
Yeah.
Right. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
Aesop's fables and any mythology,
The
everything,
Bible,
anything. So all the stories we've told for thousands of years have always had a reason to be told.
Jaws, Nemo,
yeah,
like whatever.
Yeah. So the idea, again, I think that's ego based. I can just do what I want. Oh, well, okay. Is this about you?
Yeah.
What? Then why don't you just sit at home and think it up? Why are you making me sit through it if it's not for me too?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't need to make it then. Just sit home and think.
Yeah. But it's funny because then if you ask them if they're movies, oh, what about, I love One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or I love what, I'd be like, oh, well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was something he was like.
Yeah.
There's something going on here. Ah, my cement. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a
Y-
thought experiment.
Yeah. There are reasons to tell stories. And I think that, I don't know why with the big fight. I think, you know what it is? I think people are afraid of the responsibility.
Hmm.
They're afraid of it. That's why they run from it. They're afraid of it. And you can be judged on it too.
Well, you were talking about Rod and the airplane or the
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah. Rod Serling wrote a television movie where a guy, it was the early 70s or late 60s. He wrote this thing. And a guy in the movie brought a bomb onto an airplane. And so, and then later, shortly after that, somebody did that. And I don't know if it was linked to what Rod Serling had written or not, but Rod Serling certainly took it that way and thought, I have a responsibility to put different things in the world and make sure that I don't,
Yeah.
don't inspire people to do these kinds of
Yeah.
things.
But he thought about that stuff.
He thought
yeah.
about it.
Mhm.
Now people can argue about whether or not, well, it's a crazy person. You can do that. That's fine. But it's interesting that he felt some responsibility.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Feeling, like, okay, I'm putting a thing out there. People will consume this thing, right? It's the difference between putting out, junk food
Yeah.
that's actually poisoning people, right?
Yeah.
And putting out nutritious
Yeah.
food.
Right.
Like, it's like, well, I don't think food needs to be nutritious.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
Right.
but you're poisoning people.
Yeah.
You okay with that?
Well,
Yeah. People
apparently,
are. Some
yeah.
people are. There's I heard an interview with.
Well, it's like those tech CEOs who won't let their own kids use devices,
Yeah.
but they'll have a whatever
Yeah.
$100 billion company and be like, I mean, I'd never let my kids use our products, but you should let yours.
Well, there was a guy, I heard a woman on the radio whose father invented Lunchables.
Hmm.
And he saw her eating one once and she was proud because her dad invented them. And he was like, oh, don't eat that. like really? You'll let somebody else's kids eat it,
Yeah.
but you won't eat it?
Really, he wouldn't let his daughter eat it.
No, he wouldn't let her eat it. Don't eat that.
So weird.
Isn't that that's so weird?
It's wild.
Yeah. So I just think you can't look, people will do anything and people will take what you do however they want to take it, and there's all kinds of people with all kinds of things happening in their head, and you can't be responsible for that.
Sure.
But you can be responsible for your intentions.
Right.
Right? You can be responsible
Yeah.
for that. Like, well, I can't just do this because that's irresponsible. So let me try to be a little bit more responsible
Right.
with what I try to put out. It doesn't mean you can't have violence, and it doesn't mean you can't do
sure.
it. It doesn't mean any of those things.
But it means you know that human beings are going to consume this, which they will. It'll go in their head.
Right.
And I want to think about it, right?
Yeah.
And also just like, man, I'm convinced that the people that have the guts to go for emotion, I mean, that's where it will cut through the noise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because there's so much content coming out, right?
Yeah.
And so much of it is just these bullshit thought experiments,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where it's like, yeah, I hypothesize it. Oh, it's like, just stop it. Like, you're just
Yeah.
make something worth watching, right?
Yeah.
But I still think there's room, like, if a new version, like, if the equivalent of E.T. were to come out today,
Mm-hmm.
it would go nuts,
Yeah, I think that's true.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if the equivalent of Wizard of Oz came out today, it would go nuts,
I think so.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, we haven't evolved in the last 100 years away from emotion,
No.
right?
No. We just don't get a lot of
Yeah.
it.
We just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I heard they're rebooting Princess Bride and people are pissed about it. And it's like, I guarantee you, right? They're going to cut the heart and soul out of that movie.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the Grinch. I know, it's like I watched
Yeah.
the Grinch. I was like, this is not the Grinch.
Right.
Right?
Also, Princess Bride, it's fine. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, in the scheme of things, it ain't that old.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? It's in color and,
Yeah.
it's a talkie.
Yeah.
You know,
just leave it alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
I don't understand why you would do that. I mean, but
I
they're
don't.
not making anything new. They're afraid,
Yeah.
right? So they're not making anything new. What else can we?
Yeah. What else can we reuse? But not only reuse, it's not even like, remember when they made the Psychos like shot for shot? It's like, it's not even reuse. It's remake and dumbed down
Yeah.
and suck the life out of it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I love this bread I got in France. So I want to make a new version of it that's a white loaf of bread without all the nutrients in it
Yeah.
that I can mass produce and sell at scale. And you go, that is nothing. That's not even the same.
Yeah.
It's not going to taste like the same bread at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a really strange thing. But I mean, just coming back to our charged objects thing, like, again, man, this is just one of those, like, I asked if we could talk about it today because I think it's one of those little things that doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but boy, once you get it, it makes all the difference. And it's such a great way to make a point without making a point.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you said that the pulling out that little game, and it's his little boy's game, and it's like, boy, every time he does that in the movie, it is so effective.
Yeah.
Or Bobby Fischer, right?
Yeah. Could be
Or
anything.
It could be anything.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
If they did a thing on, what's that noise?
That's a camera overheating.
Oh, is that what that is? There it goes.
You said they did a thing?
Yeah. What was I going to talk about? I got distracted.
Oh, you said that it's super effective.
Yeah. I forget what I was saying.
So I was just saying that, like, all these charged objects, this is just a great thing. If you understand it, you could leverage it to do heavy lifting for you without necessarily having to have somebody say, my dad used to come to this old ballpark. It's like, yeah, if you show that to me in the movie, you just walk through the ballpark and we know what it means to you, right?
Yep. That's exactly right. You can there's a great thing in Parenthood.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of great things in Parenthood.
Parenthood is unbelievably well written.
Yeah.
That movie is really well written.
Yeah.
And there's the son, adult son, who is problematic.
Yeah.
And he always needs money, and he always,
Yeah.
and there's a scene.
He's a good actor too.
Yeah. Tom Hulce plays Amadeus.
Yeah, Amadeus.
Yeah. And also, why can't I think of his name? He's really great in it. Jason Robards.
Yeah.
Really good in it.
Oh, yeah.
Plays the dad.
Yeah.
And they're talking, and the kid needs money and whatever, and they're having a talk in the garage.
Yeah.
In the dad's garage. And his dad has this antique car, and he goes on about this antique car.
Yep.
And like I had a car like this when I was a kid, and
finally got it fixed up.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, and then this kid needs money because there's some gamblers that want, he whatever. So he owes a bunch of money, and anyway, later, the dad goes to his garage, opens the door, and his car is gone.
Yeah,
because his son took and sold that car.
Yep.
You have a response. There's an emotional response you have because you know what that car meant.
Yep.
Just seeing the empty garage.
Yeah, you didn't need any more than that.
Yeah.
He just opens up the garage and you see it, and that's all.
That's all. Yeah.
You don't need any more.
You don't need anything else. Like, oh, that's okay.
And the way they raised his kids too, like his son and stuff. Like, man, there's some good stuff in that.
There's some really good stuff in that movie. Yeah. It's really well written, really well.
But then later on with the car, doesn't he also just kind of go like, fine, whatever?
Yeah, he lets it go.
Yeah. Which shows how much he loves his kid. Like, it's really,
yeah.
But yeah, it's a charged object. It went from just being another car,
right,
to this thing. He worked his whole life, and he's finally, able to like have that car he always wanted, and
yeah, and then his son takes it.
Yep.
Yeah, but you have to give it that emotion. You imbue it with that emotion.
Yep.
And then it's the absence of it.
Yep.
Right, not the presence of it, but the absence of it.
Yeah.
That has the power.
100%. No, it's great. There's so many good examples.
There are a ton of good examples.
I mean, remember, like, what about even like E.T., the flower from E.T., right?
Oh, the flower that dies when he's
dying.
Dying.
It's because you saw what he did, right?
Yeah.
You set it up like he can do this thing.
Yeah.
And then they cut back to it, and God.
Yeah. When it's dying, you go, oh my God.
Such a smart. People see that stuff, I think, and they go like, they're like, yeah, it's obvious. Or it's simple. It's like, try coming up with that.
Yeah.
It is such an insane.
It's really hard to do. That's really hard to do. And doesn't the flower, it does. It starts to, when he comes back alive.
When he comes back alive, he sees the flower and it's coming back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that's what makes him go, wait a second, is he alive? Right?
Yeah.
But it's just so smart.
Yeah.
It's
really
like, just put the soul into the flower, and then later on, you don't even need to see E.T. respond. You go, oh, the flower.
Right.
Right?
It's really, really nice. It's
Mhm.
it's I just don't know. You know, it's funny. Okay, here's a line. I've probably mentioned this before, but this is a really good example of a line, a callback or a replay, whatever you want to call it. In comedy, they would call it a callback. In the old days, in storytelling, they would call it a replay. But a line or an idea can become charged, right?
Mhm.
So what happens in Aliens is at the beginning of that movie, Ripley, the main character, has been in suspended animation for 70 something years or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And after escaping this alien, and then uh she wakes up, they tell her how long it's been. She has this nightmare about an alien, and you see her have this nightmare and wake up in the hospital where
Yeah.
she is, and the nurse says, "Oh, you had a nightmare. You want me to give you something to help you sleep?" And Ripley says, "No, I've slept enough," right?
Yeah.
Because she slept for
Yeah.
70 something years, right?
Yeah.
So she goes through the whole movie. At the end of the movie, they're going to be put in suspended animation because they have a long journey,
Yeah.
right? And she's putting Newt, the little girl that she saved, she's putting Newt in the thing, and Newt says, "Can we dream? Or can I dream?"
Uh-huh.
And Ripley says, "Yeah, I think we both can." Because that's the arc of the story
Yeah.
for her, right? She can now sleep. Now
Yeah.
she can sleep peacefully.
Because she
Now
dealt with it.
she dealt with her problem, so she's not going to be plagued with nightmares
Right.
anymore. And so because she started with not being able to sleep, I slept enough to, yeah, I
It
sure would like
matters.
to sleep.
Yeah.
That's charged,
Yep.
right?
Well, what I wrote down, as soon as you said a line, I wrote down be good.
Right. That's exactly right. When E.T. learns how to talk, right? They're watching Sesame Street. Gertie's watching Sesame Street, and E.T.'s just hanging around. And it's the Sesame Street where the letter B, and they're talking about the letter B. B is for basket and baseball and whatever. And E.T. pops his head up and says B. right. And he doesn't talk until then.
Yeah.
You don't know he can talk.
Yeah.
So, B. And she says, Gertie says, "You said be good." And he says, "Be good."
It's so smart.
It's
man.
really smart, right. And then,
God.
yeah. And then,
When they bring it back at the end, it
Yeah.
crushes.
yeah, when they're saying goodbye, and he says
Yeah.
to her, "Be good."
You don't get any better than that. That's like a slam dunk.
It is.
That's when you talk about like threading the needle
Yeah,
structurally and just it's perfect.
yeah. You know what's interesting? Because
Because everybody remembers that.
the older brother, they're saying goodbye, and the older brother says he doesn't know goodbye. E.T. doesn't know, because that's not something they taught him.
Yeah.
So it's only the stuff. So he says, "Be good" to Gertie, but because when Elliot got hurt
Yeah.
and said "ouch,"
Yeah.
E.T. knows "ouch" because he healed his cut,
Yeah.
right? So when he's leaving,
So good.
he points to Elliot because he knows Elliot's hurting because he's leaving.
Yeah.
He's ouch.
So good.
It's so good.
That movie's insane.
It is. It looks easy.
No,
You know?
it looks easy. That's
Yeah.
why you know you're good.
Yeah, it looks easy, but
He's
it's
so good, man.
impossible. It's impossible.
It is impossible.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how to introduce a character like that guy.
No. I read that script a
Nobody.
bunch of times. When that
Yeah.
movie came out, I bought that script. I read it a bunch of times. I've read that script over and over. I still
Yeah.
have it someplace. I've read it over and over and over and over again.
But we were talking about how like Reese's Pieces became charged objects.
They did.
So here's a candy that wasn't a big deal. As soon as this movie comes out, it explodes. Why? It wasn't the candy. It's like when kids got it, they were thinking about this feeling.
Yeah.
Right?
That's why people get souvenirs,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. I remember when Star Wars came out. What I call Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's called Episode 4 now.
Yeah.
But
Uh-huh.
when Star Wars came out, I remember everybody had a "May the Force be with you" button.
Yeah.
Everybody, or a T-shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was the feeling. It was
the
It was
feeling.
the feeling. That's what they wanted a piece of.
It was magic.
Yeah,
Like something in life that was good.
yeah. Or when I saw The Lion King,
Yeah.
on stage, like the merchandise. They make so much money selling merchandise,
Yeah.
and you'll pay anything. Oh my God, that was so
Uh-huh.
good.
Yeah.
How much for this?
Yeah.
$500. Oh,
Yeah.
whatever
Right.
it is, you'll pay anything.
No, it's how it works. But the funny thing is, when you're talking to corporations or companies or whatever, and you're like, this should be emotional, and they're like, it doesn't need to be emotional. Like, you're like, oh, I guess you don't want to sell merch. It's like you don't understand. Like, even if you really understood what you were talking about, you would see that this actually moving people and structuring it appropriately and all that kind of stuff will move people, and then as a result, you'll sell more candy or whatever you're trying to do.
So when Iron Man
Yeah.
dies,
Uh-huh.
what happens? What does he say? Do you remember? Because his daughter and he have a
Oh,
thing.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That I love you.
I
love you 10,000.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, right?
No, it was the best line of the whole movie.
I love you 10,000 because they say that,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
And then when he dies, his hologram or whatever
Yeah.
says that, and you go, oh man.
No, it was the best part of the whole movie.
And he still, like he said it. I saw Robert Downey Jr. speaking somewhere, and somebody said, I love you. He goes, I love you 10,000. Like,
Yeah,
because it's imbued with emotion.
that's right.
Yeah.
I told you I saw that movie and I was like, that was the line that got it.
Yeah.
But it's smart to put that line in there.
Of course it is.
Because it was just this little moment with him and his daughter. And then you have all the big explosions and, stuff or whatever. And then it come back to that. That's when he just landed it. And good writers know that.
Right.
And they're not scared to do that.
Right.
Cut this. It feels a little sappy. I mean, he says, I love you 10,000. It's kind of like, what did parents say that? And you're like, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
That's why it works.
Yeah.
But that's what the difference between Marvel and DC.
Yeah.
Marvel would keep the line. DC would cut it. Or
Yeah.
they'd blow somebody's head up or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
but you
right.
just go like, no, that's why it's good, is because it's human.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a guy that had everything, but the one thing that mattered to him was his daughter. It's like,
Right.
of course, that
Yeah.
makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Smart.
It's really smart. So yeah. So you can have charge objects, charge lines, charged spaces.
Yeah.
But anything that you can bring back,
Yeah.
that you've imbued with emotion, that you can bring back or take away in the case
Yeah.
of Parenthood, people will have an emotional response to it. They can't
Yeah.
help it. It's natural.
Yeah.
And it's just like in life when you have, I have my dad's watch,
Yep.
my dad's shoes,
Yep. Got the jacket.
Stuart's coat.
Mhm.
Yeah. I have a few other things from Stuart, but yeah, those things, or Spider-Man, Scott,
Yeah.
all those things, we all have them.
I told you, I was like, man, the older I get, the more I hope that, like, the older I get, the more vulnerable I get.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think it's true even for writing. I think it's true for storytelling. It's like, if anything, I look back at the stuff when I was writing in my 20s and it was so just like, trying to be cool or whatever. It's
Right.
like, man, like, get out there and just bleed. Like, give them something that
Yep.
actually moves people. Like, be okay with putting it out there
Yeah.
and just going like, this is it. This is what matters to me. This is yes, there's gonna be people out there that might make fun of it because you went for the emotion, right?
Right.
But it's a human thing that you did.
But here's what's interesting to me about that. I'm writing this piece now, and it's requiring me to really spill a lot of blood.
Yeah.
I always feel like I need to leave a piece of my soul on the page.
Yeah.
Honestly, like it takes a toll, like
Yeah.
a real toll. And that's where I'm at right now with this piece. And what's interesting about that is that if anybody's going to have a problem with it or make fun of me for it,
Yeah.
it's like, that's on them. Like,
Yeah.
like I'm not gonna, you know what I mean? All I'm trying to do
You
is
always
the
gotta
best.
go like, what have you done?
Yeah, yeah. I'm just trying to do the best work I know how
Yeah.
to do,
Yeah.
the best way I know how to do it.
Uh-huh.
And that's imbue it with emotion, and honesty. And if somebody has a problem with that, that's their problem, not my problem.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it.
Because then everybody else who reads it, they're actually moved.
Right.
Right.
So,
And you were actually able to connect with somebody and talk to them.
yeah,
And because here's the thing, life is so emotional.
yeah,
We have a thing called death. We
yeah.
have a thing called love,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We have things like betrayal. We have
Yeah.
like it's all emotional all the time.
Yeah.
And so to be like, not in my universe, you go like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. We're organic.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you forget. like we're so vulnerable
Yeah.
and delicate. Like it doesn't take anything to take a person out,
No.
right? And you go like, and it's sad, and it's and then
Mhm.
you remember the good things, and it's good that they were here, and like it's like being a human is very difficult,
Yeah, it is.
right?
Yeah.
And to pretend like it's not is just silly.
It is silly.
And
It's
it's a
not honest.
storyteller's job to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know how you could try being honest without being vulnerable or just saying
I don't either.
it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
When people try to be robots, it doesn't make any sense. It's like you're always going to be a bad robot, but you can be a good person,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Right.
And it's like I'm sure editors and stuff. I'm saying pitching books or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, it feels like you might be pushing this too far. It's like, no, push it.
Right.
By all means, push it. You were talking about Glenn Keane when he did the thing with Ariel,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
That pose that she does.
Yeah, because she was singing part of this
Part of this world,
part of this world, which I know everybody knows it. I always forget it, but I mean I know the song and I know the sequence, but when she's singing, he said that he drew her reaching out, and it's like the shot is looking down, and she's reaching out on a
and she's
certain
going
line.
up towards the light, in her like,
and
house
he thought it was maybe too far. He thought he'd maybe gone too far. He was almost embarrassed about how, but he goes, "That's what I felt." That's what I was feeling. That's what I felt, and so that's what I drew. And he risked going too far.
Yeah,
he risked it, and he said, "Boy, people come up to me all the time and tell me, boy, when I saw that, I knew exactly how she was feeling, or I felt that, or whatever."
Yeah,
people who are grown-ups now who were like kids when they saw it, and how much it meant to them that just that thing that he was afraid of. And that's the funny thing, is that people don't understand that thing you're afraid of, that thing you're afraid to do. When it comes to emotion, is usually the thing that people are like, "Oh, thank you for doing that."
It's what's going to unite us.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because every time you do it, people will say that's the thing.
Hey, Princess Bride, life is pain.
Right. Anybody tells you anybody says anything different is trying to sell you something, and that's true.
Right? Yep,
that's true.
And so, but it's funny. We even go back to Princess Bride. Apparently, they're rebooting for some reason, right?
Yeah.
But you go like, life is pain. Right?
Yeah.
But also there's love and all this. It's like, go for it, man. Make it a human experience.
Yeah.
Be okay to move people. Endow things with meaning. Like knock their socks off. I mean, my God, if you haven't seen E.T. in a while, watch it again and it'll blow your mind. You talked about Bobby Fischer. You got Spider-Man, right? It's push it. Understand it and go for it. And don't be scared of it.
Don't be scared of it. Be honest.
Yeah.
Right? That's how you stop yourself from being cheap.
Yeah.
Right? Be honest. If it's honest, it will work.
Yeah.
If you're pushing it to a place that isn't honest, then it won't work. It'll look false, and people, But if it's honest, it'll work.
But I Love You 10,000 was honest.
Yes, it was honest.
I mean, I have a little girl. As soon as they said that, I was like, oh, God. Because, right?
Right.
Because it is honest.
Right.
And I have my equivalent of that with my daughter. And whoever wrote it probably does too.
Yeah.
Because it's an honest thing. And that's why it'll work. Right. All this stuff in E.T. works because it's like what's great about E.T. is like the conversations they have, like the real mean things he says to his mom and stuff. It's like, it works because it's like, oh God, you look back and you're like, oh, I've said some mean shit to my mom too. Like the more human it is, the more honest and vulnerable, the more it will connect with people.
Yeah.
But man, it feels like you're jumping off a high dive into a pool with no water, but that's not what'll happen.
It's not what's happening. It just feels that way.
Yeah.
And if you can lean into it and do it, it does take it is courageous.
Yeah.
But that's the job. The job is to be courageous that way. I think I didn't know what it meant to be courageous as an artist until I butted up against the opposite. Then I realized that some things that I was doing were considered courageous. Like, oh, you're going to say that? You're going to put yourself, when I was doing the movie, I was talking about with the tile, the movie theater.
Yeah.
That movie, Flickering Memories. When I did that movie, there was some debate about whether or not I should put myself in there because I'm emotional in the piece. Like, oh, it's kind of cheap. But I was actually emotional. So it wasn't a lie.
Well, that piece we were just talking about a minute ago, right? We're like, no, but the people in the movie were crying because they're emotional.
Right.
Like, cut them out. Makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
It wasn't. That's
Yeah.
what happened,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Emotion shouldn't make us uncomfortable.
No. It's funny because when I gave my talk at the EG conference,
Yeah.
it was a pretty emotional, vulnerable
Yeah.
talk. And it was interesting because people liked it a lot and thought it was somehow braver than I thought it was. I thought it was my job
Hmm.
to go to that place.
Yeah.
But other people were like, no, that's not what people do. But they loved it. Like it went over really well.
Yeah.
It was a well received speech, but I just thought it was my job, and other people were like, "Oh man, I can't believe you did that."
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, that speech is crazy for anybody who hasn't watched it yet. And
But-
here's the thing, just at a really surface level, if you don't believe in charged objects, go to Comic-Con,
Right.
and you'll notice that people are selling things there,
Yeah.
right? What do you think all of those things are?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
you'll see tricorders, and you'll see, right?
yeah.
Like whatever. Oh,
Yeah.
that's the boomstick from Hellboy. Oh, that's the right. What do you think all that stuff is?
Yeah.
And whatever that industry's worth,
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, it's all charged objects.
Yeah.
And so if you really want to, you know, it's just one more tool for your tool belt or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? It's just funny. Like when we were at Comic-Con, it just hit my mind. I was like, all that stuff is like, it's
all of it. That's what it is.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. It's just a big old room full of charged
Go to
stuff.
Disneyland. What do you think those things are?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So if that's the thing, if you do want to sell things,
You'll never sell these mouse ears. You know, you're like,
yeah.
it's a mouse. Mouse's ears don't even look like that.
yeah.
They'll never buy these. You're like, what are you talking? Like,
Yeah.
people look goofy with these on. We're not going to sell any of them. It's like, you know, it's like, what
Yeah.
are you doing? You don't
Yeah.
understand how people work.
Yeah. It's funny, you know, selling nostalgia wasn't really a huge thing until American Graffiti.
Hmm.
And so George Lucas is, you know,
Man, he was
reminiscing.
always at the center of that.
I
stuff.
know,
Like,
reminiscing about his childhood,
Yeah.
and or his teenagerhood, and brought back all that stuff. All of a sudden, people were selling, you know, records, compilations of all those songs from that period, and selling all that stuff. People were, you know, people like to go back to,
Yeah.
oh, I remember that. I
Simpler
love that.
time or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Or a time when just to remember things,
Yeah.
just a piece of the past,
Yeah.
you know? So, and then you can sell people pieces of their past.
Oh,
so
all day long.
easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because now that I'm,
Because for them, it's a charged object. Like, I'm going to put on this song, and this song, you know, you might not know this, but, you know, it was really hard to get a date with your mom the first time. And
Yeah.
I convinced her, and it was our first song, and I'm going to play it for you. That song you'll always hear and go, oh, that was my parent. You know, their first dance was to that song. Or
I had a friend who had older parents, and they'd been through World War II, and they got married during, I think, the war or something. And so when their 50th anniversary came up, his family, he has a bunch of kids, they're Catholic, they have a ton of kids, and so they all got together and they were like, we're gonna make this a 1940s themed you know, anniversary party, and they found all the music and all the stuff, and they like, this is gonna be great. And so then they did it, and then the mom was upset, and they were like, why we, you know, this is when you got married, and all this music is great, and she's like, all this makes me think about is the war and how awful the war was and everything we went through. It was a terrible time.
just let the air out of the balloon.
Yeah.
Well, we love you, Mom. You know, the intentions were good, I guess.
But all it reminded her of was how terrible the war was, and that how worried everybody was about the people they knew who were going to war, and
Yeah.
you know, and yeah, but that was like they thought it was going to be charged with
Yeah.
good things, and it was charged with all these.
You can charge things in any direction, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You can make a red hat mean something.
You can make a red hat mean something. Yeah.
As silly as that sounds, you can make a hat mean something.
You can make anything mean something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like I said, it was weird to go to that place where the guy had Klan. Like,
When we're in Memphis?
no,
No. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, the museum guy, right?
Yeah.
Like a Klan outfit is nothing. It's like just sheet with,
Yeah.
you know,
It's terrifying.
it's terrifying.
I remember we were walking around Memphis,
Mhm.
and you're like, you know what that is? And it's just like a concrete, like little like speaking podium thing, and you're like, that's where they bought and sold people.
Yeah.
It was like, what? And it was behind a church, and it was across the street from the courthouse.
Yeah.
You're like, right there. All of a sudden, you're like, you didn't even know where to step.
Right.
It became almost this like holy place. Like, whoa. It's like walking into Auschwitz or something.
Yeah.
Where you're like, I almost feel like you should whisper.
Yeah. It
Like,
felt really.
you know,
Yeah.
it
Yeah, this
becomes
big
places get changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before that, I'd walked past that. I had no idea what it was. Then later on, you're like, you know what that? I didn't know what that. I just walked past it. It was just a street corner.
Yeah. But it
And all of a sudden, you look at everything differently, and you're like, "Oh, dude!"
Yeah, they sold people there, and
Behind the church is where they sold people.
Yeah, yeah, and that was an old church. It may have been.
Yeah.
There. There was a platform there where there
Yeah.
used to be a statue of the guy. There
Mhm.
was Nathan Bedford Forrest, and
Yeah, they put a statue where they used to sell people.
Yeah, and it's not there anymore. But I stood up there. Did I
Yeah.
stand there when you were there?
Yeah, we went. Yeah,
But did I stand on that spot? Because
I
I
think
stood on
so,
that spot
yeah.
because I wanted to. I try to put myself in the position of being a person who would be on sale.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I remember I stood there and I closed my eyes and I listened for what kind of birds I would hear and how the
Mm.
wind felt and how to make it more real for myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you've written about that stuff in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
was this the first time you've been to a place where that had happened?
Yeah, I think it's the first
Like
time.
an actual market?
Yes.
Like where they sold people?
Yeah. It was the first time I'd
Yeah.
been to a place like that. Yeah. Yeah, there are places like that I'd like to go just for my own,
Yeah.
but I haven't. No, it's the only place I've ever been like that. And that is definitely a charged
Yeah.
space,
Right.
you know?
Yep. Yeah, it's a trip.
It is a trip.
Wasn't that long ago, man. It's crazy. You
Yeah.
said Stewart had actually met slaves.
Stewart, yeah, he was born in the 20s. And in the 20s, there were still people alive who had been slaves. And he met a couple of slaves, yeah, that he talked to at different times. He
Yeah.
met these slaves. Yeah. And one woman told him, I've read about it since in other things, but one woman told him that where she was a slave, that they would feed the slaves out of a trough. Like they would throw this sort of gruel down a trough, and enslaved people would eat out of this trough like pigs. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And takes us back to this thing.
Right.
Bought a person for one of these or 10 of these or whatever it was. It's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's all patinaed and then it's still around.
Yep.
Like it doesn't look that old.
No, it doesn't.
Just a piece of metal. But you just think that's it. That's what someone's life is worth.
I brought it into the office one day and somebody wouldn't touch it when they knew what it was.
Really?
Yeah. She wouldn't touch it. She's like, no, I'm not touching that. That's charged.
Yeah, because
I'm
you
not-
also don't know how many different people were bought with that same.
Yeah.
Because how many times could it be exchanged back and forth? And
Yeah, I don't know. But
Isn't that crazy?
yeah, but she would not touch it because it was
Yeah,
charged.
it's almost cursed now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
All right, charged objects.
Yeah. Well, I think I think that covers it.
I think it does. Hopefully it made the point.
I hope so.
It's an awesome thing, though. When you understand how to use it, you could use it to make a point in a really effective way without saying anything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really valuable tool, and not enough people use it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for watching You Are a Storyteller. If you have any questions, or if there's a storytelling topic you'd like us to cover, leave a comment below or email us at hello@beliefagency.com.